Every company, once they get to a certain size, becomes a bank, basically. That's why, by the way, Apple released the Apple credit card. And like Apple Pay is so important, right? Because ultimately, if you can control the money, that's where the opportunity is.
Welcome to Thought Wave, where we discuss tips, tricks, and hacks.
I gotta interject here. So you like to use a naughty word in this intro, Christopher, and some of us are parents. And so I was listening to our last episode in the car with my 5-year-old and 8-year-old, and then I'm having to explain to these little girls what the S word is. I'm just thinking, maybe there's some family people out there that want to listen with their families. Have we ever thought about that, Chris?
Fine. So we want to take this PG now? Is that what we're saying?
I think there's a rule, right? A PG-13, you can have, like one profanity per. I think there's a number.
So I've
right?
got to be very choosy in this case about like it's got to be very well timed and well placed, is what you're saying.
You know what? It reminds me of my brother taught this to me about profanities, because I went through like every good teenager, I went through a profanity phase, and then he's like, Aaron, you got to understand, you really need to limit profanities so that way when you use them, they're very effective. If you use them too much, they're just not effective. So I'll give you one an episode, but choose wisely.
All right, this feels like a lot of pressure. I'm going to do my best. We'll see what happens. I can't promise anything.
Okay.
And you may be explaining some other words to your kids in the car, but at least they'll get to know Uncle Chris and potentially forgive him for his unpolished nature, I'd say.
You better give them Christmas presents. That's all I care about. You can buy their love.
Christmas presents? Okay.
Easy.
Fine.
Easy to buy their love.
Fair enough. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and actually kick this off? Are you ready? Let me see if I can clean this up.
Let's do it.
So welcome to Thought Wave, where we discuss tips, tricks, and hacks for audience builders, entrepreneurs, and people who just want to do things. I'm joined by Dr. Aaron Dinin. I'm Chris Leith. And what do we got going on today? What's in the news? What are we discussing, and how are we going to help these entrepreneurs and audience builders, achieve their dreams
and do things? And we make balloon animals too, everyone. We're face painting services for hire at your next kid's birthday party. We're recording this on Halloween, October 31st. Happy Halloween, Chris.
Thank you.
So we're recording this on Halloween, and I think Halloween is a very sensitive time of the year for me. So Halloween is basically the start of what I can only describe as 2 months of just ridiculousness in my household, because my daughter's birthday is November 1st, so it's the day after Halloween. So we have Wild Halloween, and then we go into my daughter's birthday. And of course, it really doesn't fall on the weekend, so then there's like the birthday party in the weekend. Then my second daughter's birthday is a couple weeks later, so then we do her birthday, and then it's Thanksgiving, and when you got Thanksgiving, that's when all the family gets together, and so they just hold their presents then. So then it's like we celebrate their birthday again on Thanksgiving, and then I'm Jewish, and so we celebrate Hanukkah because I'm Jewish, so they get 8 nights of whatever crazy Hanukkah is. But then my wife is Christian, so they also get Christmas. And so basically from Halloween, from today until January 1st, it's like a constant birthday party in my house. And you think that's like it's not my birthday party, it's the little kids' birthday parties. And I just die a little inside with all the presents and that. But it brings into what I want to talk about. Okay, so it's consumer culture, and I don't mean that in a bad way. A lot of people say consumer culture in a bad way, but
Sure.
I've noticed that, of course, what used to be kind of Black Friday-ish, Thanksgiving, like Christmas starts after Thanksgiving. It's like Christmas, it starts at Halloween now, I guess, and now like before Halloween, the lead up to Halloween, and so like the entrepreneurial implications of that to me are just fascinating. Have you ever noticed that?
Let me stop you real quick, because I was on a call this morning, October 31st, and one of my friends was on the call, and she had already decorated her entire apartment with Christmas paraphernalia. Everything.
Christmas?
Like Christmas trees. She had the garlands up along the top of the wall. I mean, it was fully decked out. She's a wonderful human, and that is a quirk, and I appreciate it. She's very festive, and I think it means a lot to her.
So the thing that I'm always fascinated about is there's this concept in entrepreneurship. It's called traffic leaking. And the idea is, think about it this way. If you want to start posting beautiful pictures of fall foliage, you're not going to start posting it on Instagram and then tell other people to join Instagram so they can look at your pictures, right? The idea is like you post on Instagram because there's already a lot of people on Instagram, and then you are leaking the traffic backwards to you because that's where the people already are. And so this concept came up around search engine optimization. The idea is like people are already going to these search engines and Google and whatnot, and by traffic leaking, it's like, hey, let me go to where the people are and position myself in front of them. And to me, holidays, they seem like traffic leaking, right? Everyone's talking about Christmas, so let's just lean into Christmas. Everyone's talking about Halloween, let's just lean into Halloween. I think it's great. It's very smart. It's what entrepreneurs should do, and I think a lot of them resist it because they think entrepreneurship is all about being creative or innovative or brilliant or doing what other people wouldn't have thought of. And in my experience, you should do the opposite. Like if everyone's going towards something, you should run that way too, because that's where the people are.
So let me make sure I understand. So are you suggesting in this case that if you're building an audience and you're trying to build a marketing program or something around your company, your product, that instead of going the direction of talking about pumpkin spice lattes and the fall foliage and Halloween and all of those kind of things, you should do something actually that's completely different? Is that what you're saying?
No. The opposite. You should lean into pumpkin spice everything in your life. Everything you're selling should have a pumpkin spiciness to it, because I think entrepreneurs have this fear of doing what everyone else is doing because they think, oh, that's not creative and I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur. I'm supposed to be creative. I did that when I was my first job. I was running a magazine, and I came in and it was like the startup magazine, and I was like, no, we're not doing any holiday themes because every magazine around February is the Valentine's issue, or November is the Thanksgiving issue. And I was like, no, we're not doing that because we're going to be different. And within 6 months, I realized, oh, no, we should be doing that. There's a reason. It's an anchor point that it makes people comfortable to enter something. So pumpkin spicing your world is a comfortable anchor point that allows consumers to want to enter into whatever you're trying to sell.
I love this idea. And, it makes me think, I don't know if you've been driving around your neighborhood like I have and see these huge, like 12-foot skeletons.
Yeah, what's up with those?
Okay. So I wanted to do a little bit of research on it because they didn't actually start coming around until the pandemic. And it was actually Home Depot that started selling these. And I was like, why Home Depot, right? Why? That seems like an odd thing for a, hardware store to sell. Okay. So I start going and researching this, and it turns out that the person, I think they were either a marketing or product leader at Home Depot, and they wanted to capitalize on the holiday themes like you're talking about because they thought it would drive traffic into the store. Okay. And so they actually did product research on this to figure out what was the best way to get people in during that Halloween season. And they started to look at all the whole landscape of Halloween goods. Okay. So yard decorations and that kind of thing. And they did a bunch of research, and they found that they wanted something that stood out, that was like large and something that was impressive looking, so that it caught eyeballs and got people thinking and talking about things. And you can imagine the social media implications. They didn't mention that, but you can imagine how well that played. And then they had some other limitations. Okay, so it had to be something that was impressive looking. It also had to be something that could fit in people's cars. Because, of course, if you can't get it from Home Depot to home easily, it's going to be a problem. And then
nothing worse than renting that truck. Having to rent that Home Depot truck. It's terrible.
Or bugging a friend for it or whatever. It's hard, and people wouldn't want to do that. And so then it had to also be cost effective. So it couldn't be hundreds of dollars. It had to be something that people could spend money on without thinking too hard about it. So they said that a 12-foot skeleton was going to be the thing that they were going to go with. And specifically, they wanted it to be 12 feet tall. And I don't know if this is really the reason behind it or not, but this article said that this was the case, is they wanted to be able to look down on 10-foot basketball goals.
Oh, okay. Because suburban house, you got a little basketball goal.
There you go. Okay, so you've got this basketball goal, and so it kind of melds in with the rest of the things that you have going on in your landscape. And so they started selling this. And of course, like these things sell out, and they start popping up everywhere. And I think, one, to your earlier point, like lean into the Halloween side of things. So what if everybody's doing it? But they also took it as an opportunity to be creative. And I think we as entrepreneurs and business owners out there have this opportunity to capitalize on a trend, but also do it in a way that's cool, unique, and causes a lot of buzz.
I had no idea that was out of Home Depot. That's brilliant. I don't associate Home Depot with my decor, my holiday decor, but oddly enough, orange. I really should associate with it, but that's brilliant. I really love, I keep thinking back about that part about making sure it fits in the car, because what it brings up is the idea of barriers to entry. It's something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't fully consider. They come up with this brilliant idea for, one of my companies was kind of this, we thought about moving it into the CRM space, and we're like, yeah, because, everyone needs a CRM, without recognizing that once you already have a CRM in place, like the switching cost is just overwhelming. So like the idea of like, yeah, you could have a better CRM, but like, do you know how much work it takes for a company to switch over their CRM? Like, heck no, that barrier to entry is huge. And, in the consumer world, right, that barrier to entry of I got to go get my buddy to help me bring this thing home would be enormous. So thinking how is it going to be easy to get home? This actually, IKEA does this really well too, right? I mean, that's why IKEA has these kind of flat packs of furniture. It's the idea that you can go in, see something you like, buy it, put it in your car and bring it home, because otherwise it's a big old barrier to entry.
It's a big barrier to entry. And the thing that shouldn't be lost here, we talk a lot about audience building tips and tricks. I bet you the person who was coming up with this idea was thinking about the potential online video and the virality of the thing that they were creating. And so one of my favorite things to tell entrepreneurs, it's all about beginning with the end in mind. And so if you're creating this strategy, well, if one of the endpoints is you want people posting about this on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, well, start with that. You have to have something that's worth posting about. So that becomes one of your filters as you're considering your marketing or product strategy in this case.
I teach a narrative design class to graduate students here at Duke, and one of the my last point in everything before I have this narrative planning worksheet to help people plan out is what's going to make this thing shareable, because shareability is key. We should be even thinking about this for this podcast. What's going to make this shareable, Chris? Chris will give $1,000 to everyone who shares this.
And Aaron Dinin will reimburse me for that.
Oh man, afterwards. That's such a great point. The word actually I've been using a lot in my head is spectacle recently. Like, how do you turn something into a spectacle? And you think about Halloween is this great opportunity for spectacle. The holidays are a great opportunity for spectacle. Lean into the spectacleness of it. I just posted it's going viral now. It's fun. A piece of content from my classes where I had my students carving pumpkins, and and I knew it's spectacly. It's there were certain core lessons I wanted to teach, but I could have taught those lessons a bunch of different ways. The way I chose to teach it was carving pumpkins, because I knew if I had big old giant, I got some big old pumpkins. They were really hard to carry into my classroom.
I bet.
But I brought these big pumpkins. It was just spectacly to have these pumpkins there. So how can you bring spectacle into your product? Because we live in the age. I hate to say it's a cliche, attention economy, right? We live in the age where attention is the thing. So
yeah, and even getting more tactical on this, I love what you're saying about this. One of my clients is a medical distributor. I actually got a couple of them. They implants and things like that. Okay, so one of the things that they have trouble with is like, how do you get meetings with new physicians? You got to get past the gatekeeper. You've got to get them interested. And a lot of people, like, the classic thing is you drop off this brochure on your product or whatever, and you expect the physician to sit down and to read this brochure. But what usually happens? What do you think happens to that brochure?
I mean, it goes into the square filing. Wait, I can't remember the word. There's a funny joke for trash can, recycling bin. Wherever.
That's right. Whatever that is, right?
Whatever that joke is. In for a joke.
Immediately. And so even if you could capture that person's attention in that moment in a unique way, how would you do that? And one of the ways that we were talking about, because I remember when you and I were working at that company together, AdWorks, a little while ago, we were always kind of innovating on how to get people engaged within the marketing and sales process. And I don't know if you remember this, but we came across those video brochure books.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? Okay. And so that is a physical thing. It's a video. It's a piece of technology, something that you don't want to throw away. because it's a screen. It feels like throwing away an iPad almost. It's not that solid or whatever, but it just kind of feels like that. And so we said, all right, well, maybe how do we solve the problem of them wanting to just throw it away immediately? Can we solve that one problem first? And so the next experiment is like, all right, well, let's see if we can use these video brochures as a way to solve that problem, to make it a little bit more spectacly, like you were talking about.
I think that's right on. These video brochures, right? Like they were like little tablets. I mean, cheap Android tablets, but they kind of played the ad and kind of cost nothing. And they're disposable function, especially if you're going after a client that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like
there you go.
That customer acquisition cost, if you had to pay $20 per little video machine, but like no one's going to throw out a tablet. Like that's a weird thing to throw away. And so it feels like you're creating value, and you're creating this kind of attention. You're creating value. I love that. So I guess to make it actionable for our listeners here, right, is how can you take whatever it is that you're building, doing, trying to sell, and take it from kind of plain to spectacle. I love the word spectacle, but like attention grabbing. Right, what's going to grab someone's attention and make them think twice?
And here's the way that you could take it even one step further is there's grabbing their attention, then there is helping them grab their customers' attention. And I think a lot of people miss that second leap and they don't really think about that. So you could imagine, let's just use the physician setting again. Well, what if in addition to what you've put on that video, you also have an explainer video that explains on the physician's behalf how the hardware is going to work, but the intended audience is actually the patient. So the physician can be like, here, Mr. or Mrs. Patient, take a look at this. This is the procedure we're going to be doing. This is the hardware. This is why it's some of the best hardware in the market. And so the physician doesn't have to necessarily worry about getting all the nuances correct because it's the device company that is the true expert on what they're building and making and how it works because it's all developed by physicians and PhDs and researchers. So they know exactly how to articulate the problem or the solution to this surgery. So imagine if not only it was a marketing piece for the physician, but also they were then able to use it with their patients afterwards. So you take that additional step.
And this is one of the best insights I think I ever got that helped get more sales in the company, a sales enablement tool. And one of the customers said, I need a way to like show this to my boss. It's like, oh, well, I can give you a login for the boss. And it's like, no, like that's not gonna help. And basically the feature wound up being one of the most valuable features we ever built that really helped the company take off was a little, print metrics to PDF button, basically to take that dashboard and print out in PDF. So then low-level person could take their work and all the great work they've been doing, press print, and basically just send it off to their boss. And so the boss could easily see all the work they had done. And so if you can enable your customer to show whoever that customer is responsible to, in some sort of valuable, meaningful way, it creates enormous value for them because everything's bunches about audience still, right? If nobody knows you're doing something amazing, then it doesn't matter. So how can you help your customer tell their boss that they're doing something amazing? Or how can you tell that physician you're selling to, show their patient that they're going to do something amazing? Help that person communicate it well, and they're going to love what you're doing.
Genius, because that is their customer's customer. So in that case, the employee's customer is their boss for that feature, which is super interesting.
There's a phrase in here, your customer's customer is your customer. As we're talking about this, it just scrolled up on my screen. I just got a notification referencing so Apple Intelligence rolled out a couple days ago as when we're recording this. And to me, that is a really huge deal. Not because it's AI, but because to me, Apple's a market maker. And this is what I think so many people don't understand about Apple. They always hear Apple and they think, oh, they're a brilliant technology company. And they are a brilliant technology company. But the interesting thing is they don't invent new technologies. They come to the table into nascent markets, I remember learning about the iPhone on a smartphone, right? I was using a smartphone and I read an article about the freaking iPhone, right? Like, it's not like smartphones didn't exist. What Apple did is Apple made smartphones, something that my grandma used, right? And, and that's what Apple does. It does it with a smartwatch. It does it with a tablet. I was using a tablet in college in 2004, right? And everyone always looked at me like I was crazy because I had this like tablet and I'm like, no, this is amazing. And everyone's like, that's weird. That's stupid. And now like all my students have tablets, but it's just people hadn't adopted yet. Same with MP3 players. players. I had an MP3 player in college. Nobody had it. I'm like, no, this is the wave. Come on. Then the iPod comes out, right? So that's what Apple does. And so for Apple to kind of integrate AI into their phone right now, that's when grandma starts to use it. And what is that? I mean, that's going to mean enormous things.
So what you're saying is this big because there's like it's going to help more people adopt this on a larger scale than is probably being used right now, even with ChatGPT and Gemini and whatnot. When Apple releases something, it's all of a sudden it puts it automatically into your pocket and you're ready to go.
And and that wasn't a total tangent. I was saying, oh, we should workshop this, and I'm starting to train my brain to whenever I go like, oh, I should workshop the words here to not just try to do it in my head, but like, oh, that would be a good use of ChatGPT, and literally that's a good use. And this isn't me just being lazy. It's basically what your brain is doing when workshopping a phrase is it's putting a bunch of different combinations of words together until you find something that looks good. Well, what ChatGPT does, what these large language models do, is they put lots of combinations of words together. That's what they do. And I was looking for patterns. And so I'm trying to train my brain. If I have that thought of, oh, what's a better way of saying this? I don't need to just rely on my brain, which has very limited vocabulary, relatively and very limited knowledge. Like, oh, I can go to this thing that's going to do it super fast on a high level. But other people are going to move to that. So it reminds me of my dad owned a body shop, a car body shop. If there was like a mechanical issue, they would spend freaking forever trying to figure out how to fix this mechanical issue. And I was visiting one day from college and I walked in and he was telling me about this thing they were working on. I'm like, oh, here. And I just walked over to computer and I went to YouTube and I found like a video that explained how to do it. I'm like, oh, there's your answer. And my dad's mind was blown, right? Because he just came from a generation. He didn't immediately think, oh, let me go search for the answer. And so they were sitting there going through this long process of iteration and figuring out, and it totally changed his world that he could just solve these problems that used to take him weeks in minutes. And this is what AI and phones is going to do, right? Is now it's going to take grandma and get grandma used to being like, oh, if I need the right words for something, I don't need to do it in my head. I'm just going to go to my phone. That seems important, right?
Aaron, I love this because one of the things that I've started doing, I used to go to Google to answer all my how-to questions. And then I heard couple months ago about Perplexity, which is a new search engine that's trying to use AI to give you the answer that you need right away. And it's perfect for how to questions. So even small things like, how do I change this setting on my phone? Because as you know, and a lot of my now friends have been cheering me on about it, I finally made the switch to an iPhone. I know. It's huge news. Everybody is like, oh my God, you've got blue bubbles. This is amazing. I'm like, yep, they're blue.
15
cool.
years.
Right.
This has been a battle.
We got there. So I don't know how to use this yet. I'm learning it. I'm figuring it out. It's fine. All my friends are excited about it. So great. And I don't know how to use it. So I go to Perplexity and I'm like, how do I do this setting? And guess what it does? Every time it gives me boop, 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 boop. Here are the 3 steps. Click here, click here, click here. And I'm done. And that to me, from an AI perspective, like that has helped me become so much more efficient on a day-to-day basis, just like you were helping your dad, right? And somehow, it takes in all of this data on the internet and it boils it down and it gives you the key steps. Because one big problem that a lot of these how-to articles have, I don't know if you notice this, but software changes so quickly. So those how-to articles are always out of date and they're wrong. And the user interfaces have changed. And actually, this has been helping me get access to the most updated version of whatever question I'm trying to answer. In the most cases, I'd say like it's probably accurate 95% of the time with how it actually is today. And that is a game changer with how fast everything is moving.
You know what I'm most excited about here is I hadn't thought about it, but recipes. You mean I'm never going to have to read a 10-page article before I get to a recipe or scroll through the 10-page article to get to the just tell me how long to cook the chicken for, please. I got to make dinner.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
But how do people make money in that world, right? Because the reason that 10-page recipe article exists is because you got to put all the ads and stuff. And where's the money and how is that going to impact businesses?
Okay. I've got a theory on this. All right. And as soon as you said the whole recipe thing, there is a reason why you will buy a cookbook from a James Beard Award winning chef. because you know that that person has reached a certain level of expertise in cooking in their art form that has garnered them that accolade. Okay. Like one of my favorite recent cookbooks that I got a couple of years ago was The Good Book of Southern Baking. And it's by this person who won the James Beard Award down in Louisiana. She's amazing. Anyway, like I trust the amount of work, effort, research, etc., that has gone into that book. And actually in the book, she talks about going through like a year or two of trying to figure out how to make the best chocolate chip cookie. And let me tell you, they are the best chocolate chip cookies you can make. I think that what ultimately is going to happen is you're going to see people that are able to niche down further into their area of expertise. They're going to be able to learn more quickly about what's happening on or what they're trying to sell or be an expert on. And I think ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to likely find who are those experts, what are those accolades out there, so that we know that the person who made this spaghetti recipe actually is the expert on this spaghetti recipe. And so I think we're actually going to go further towards maybe more cults of personality in the way that we consume information. So we may get quick answers from AI, but really at the end of the day, it's going to be all around your clout, your expertise, etc. Because I'm going to want to go to who's the best person to learn this thing from. And there's a reason why all these accounts where they're cults of personality, they have merch stores because people want to support the people that they care about. So I think that's maybe where it's going to shift. I don't know. What do you think about it?
You're right, because I don't need the person who tells me how to fix a setting on my iPhone or fix my sink to really have a big YouTube channel, right? That and in the past that's kind of what was happening, because you had these creators going in and kind of teaching how to do these tasks that that AI is going to take over. And so you're right, and of course we're seeing this of people building big personality brands around themselves. It was interesting. I was thinking a lot about merch today because I was on Disney Plus and there was a show, and in the top there was like a link to, get the merchandise by going to the store. And I was thinking, whoa, Disney Plus has like merch links on it now, but it's like everything has a merch link on it now. You can't get away from the idea that someone is trying to get you to go buy a specific product. I mean, that's what TikTok has become, by the way, at this point. It's kind of the joke among the TikTok creator community is you will not get any views unless you are promoting something in TikTok Shop. But if you're promoting something in TikTok Shop, you can have all the views you want, which is a big problem for me because nobody really wants, Professor Chic style or Professor Shabby style. So I don't really have a good TikTok Shop angle. And so it's really hard to grow on TikTok because of that. But like if you're selling something, if you're pushing people to a product, you're good to go. And I think you're right about this kind of niches. There's always this question, right? That's always up in the air. And there's always a debate of like, should you niche down? Is there value in niche? What do you think of that debate, Chris? Like where do you stand on the niche debate?
I think it's a great question. And I think one of the things that was in the news recently was what was going on with the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos' decision to not endorse a candidate. Okay. And, the argument on one side was, hey, this is a very important election. It's so tight. We need to do what we can, whatever, to put our opinion out there. The other side of the debate was, hey, we want to remain neutral. Like we want people to believe that the Washington Post is this neutral entity that's writing about things from a non-biased perspective, which, as we all know, is a very hard thing for any publication, especially a newspaper, to do. And so one would argue like he's taking a broader approach in some ways where he believes that, hey, we want both liberal and conservative readership on this. And we want to be the newspaper for everyone, where everyone can come to trust the news. Another argument would be, actually, we want to stay in a specific niche. Because I don't know if you feel like this, but traditionally it's always felt like the Wall Street Journal was like the business newspaper for me. That's like, if you were into business and you wanted to know about what was happening in the economy and entrepreneurship and business, you read their articles. And that had since changed for me, but I think there's value in that, in getting really good at one thing. And I think it's really hard when you try to please everyone. You kind of become a master, or what is that? The idea is a jack of all trades, a master of none. So I do think it's if I had to choose in general, I would say it's important to at least start being really good at something. So like if you're an entrepreneur and you're starting, get really good at solving that one problem first. And then I would say you can start to get out of that niche and start to build in others. And usually what that looks like is a vertical strategy. And that's how, when I was at helping lead sales at ShareFile and Citrix, that's how we started in accounting. And we got really good about solving file sharing in accounting. And then we added in another vertical and another vertical and another vertical until we had, 7 to 9 different verticals. And at that point, our niche went from accounting to helping professional services businesses. And then we started to branch out of that. So maybe your niche gets larger as time goes on. I don't know. What do you think?
That's certainly the goal, right? Is to expand outwards. I'm a big fan of the kind of the niche strategy, and and of course expanding out of it. It goes back to the interesting thing about the newspapers, right? Because what a lot of people, I'm about to spoil it. I got a TikTok I'm about to make on this. So spoiler alert for that TikTok, heaven forbid. But thinking about the history of like why our media is the way our media is, it actually comes down to this guy named Benjamin Day, an entrepreneur in like the 1820s, I believe, 1823 maybe, or he was 23 years, early 1820s, 1830s. He creates the first penny press. It's called the Daily Sun, I think, or something like that. So it's the first penny press. And of course, so the penny press, as the name says, is like, hey, we're going to sell these newspapers for a penny, which is way cheaper than what newspapers were cost before that. And this is a big deal, right? Because you're selling a newspaper for a penny, now you're getting a lot more people access to it because you've dramatically brought down the price. But what this does is, it still costs them, even though it's cheaper to produce and it's and printing costs have gone down, it still costs money to create and sell and distribute all these newspapers. And so they have to monetize another way. And so what Benjamin Day comes up with, the real innovation of the penny press isn't the price of the penny. The real innovation is creating what we might call expiring news. Before Benjamin Day and the penny press, if you picked up a newspaper and it was like a week old, couple weeks old, a month old, like that was totally normal because you didn't think of news as something that, happened today or happened yesterday. And like that was news. And so what happens is the penny press needs to print more often because it needs to rely on advertisers. It was like a big cornerstone. It was even like the masthead that, the Daily Sun was there for readers and advertisers. And so what he did is he shifted news to this kind of funded by corporations, by people who wanted to advertise. And so we had to get as much readership as possible. So we had to start producing every day. And so we had to start creating content that was expiring that you wanted to read every day. And so that's where this kind of move towards continuous news come from. Now this is really important because what happens when this shift starts to occur and we get ad-supported journalism is that, well, it turns out it's not about, the most valuable audiences for selling something are rarely about reaching the biggest audience. It's about reaching the most targeted audience. So for example, if I am trying to sell energy drinks, then honestly, 50, 60, 70-year-olds probably aren't my target demographic. And if I'm trying to tell, blood pressure meds and Cialis, then, 20, 30-year-olds aren't my target demographic. And so the most valuable thing to be able to sell to advertisers is a clear demographic. And so what happens is the news starts to become like polarization. This is where polarization comes from. It comes from the fact that these media companies need to segment into niches because having 100,000 readers, all 60-year-old males over the age, 60-year-old males over 60-year-old males over the age of 60. You know where I'm going with this. Males over the age of 60, right, is a valuable demographic for a certain advertiser, and having a bunch of females under the age of 25 is a valuable demographic for another group of advertisers. And so that's what polarization it is a byproduct of this. It's wildly frustrating, but it speaks to the power of niches. Niches is where you can sell to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what a fascinating idea here, because at the end of the day, you're really talking about, in this case, especially with the newspapers, that you've got to be able to sell advertising. And so you're actually, the content that you're creating and the way that you're slicing that content, you have to actually think about it as being usable in a pitch eventually. Mm-hmm. And so that is super interesting as you start to launch a new endeavor, or you start to build your own audience, you're figuring out who's really resonating with your content, and then who are those who are the advertisers in this case that are most relevant to that niche. And a lot of times what I love about what you've taught me, Aaron, over time is this transition from the garage startup to what you call the bedroom startup, which is really a shift from product first audience building to audience first audience building. And then you figure out ultimately who your audience is and what kind of product you should build in order to serve that audience, which seems to me to be in general a more efficient way of going about entrepreneurship.
I think it's wildly more efficient. And, and the interesting thing about it to me is that every company at some level of success ultimately becomes an audience company. I mean, going back to Apple, what we were talking about, Apple is an audience company. And so what it's doing is it brings its audience into new markets. But think about airlines. Where airlines make most, do you know where airlines make most of their money?
I have no idea. I thought it was ticket prices, but what is it?
No, like that's basically a loss. In a lot of cases, break even, and it's like kind of they lose money on that. It's the credit cards, it's the and the loyalty programs. They're
right.
Functioning airlines are banks, right? And every company once they get to a certain size becomes a bank, basically. That's why, by the way, Apple released the Apple credit card, and like Apple Pay is so important, right? Because ultimately, if you can control the money, that's where the opportunity is. If you can get people basically giving you large chunks of cash. The Starbucks. I mean, the reason everything goes into that Starbucks app is because lots of people hold money in their Starbucks app, and that's just free money that Starbucks just gets to hold on to and gets to monetize in other ways, gets to make interest on it and can leverage because your money is sitting in Starbucks's app. And it's wild to think about from a consumer perspective. And by the way, I'm not saying any of this is bad. I'm not like, how dare you, Starbucks or Delta, for trying to do it. I think it's actually a very smart way to think about business. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you're building a company right now, you're probably thinking about this kind of amazing product that you're building, but I want you to recenter yourself around less about product and more about your audience. What kind of audience are you building? All right, what is that niche? What is that category? And by the way, like, you're always going to have a niche. Even like Taylor Swift, who has a massive audience, has a niche. We can still call it a niche, right? It's like a group. There's a very distinct flavor to her primary audience there, right? Even though it's enormous, it's certainly still very distinct, right? So you're going to have a distinct audience. You can always grow and expand that audience, as Chris was talking about with ShareFile, and they kind of moved kind of incrementally and slowly outward. But that's what you're trying to do. And smart entrepreneurs are thinking about what is that audience and how do I bring that audience with me to other endeavors as I grow, as I expand as a business.
You got to leave people wanting more. This is a very important lesson here from an entrepreneurial perspective. Always leave them wanting more. And with that, I want to thank everybody in the audience for listening to this episode of Thought Wave. This is our third episode, actually, where we discuss tips, tricks, and hacks for audience builders, entrepreneurs, and people who just want to do things. People who just want to do things. So with that, thank you, everybody. See you next time. Like, subscribe, follow along wherever you get your podcasts. Bye.